Good morning. I'm going to be going over the tour of the geologic timescale with you, and we're going to be talking about certain highlights that happened in Earth's history involving life and some of the new forms of life that we would see. Now, when we look at the fossil record, we're talking about things that we found right in the Earth: fossils, trace fossils, evidence of fossils, and we can go back 3.5 billion years to a point where we can see the first bacterial cells or single cells. Now, there's evidence of life before that, but to get the first cells, we're talking 3.5 billion years. And these were, during this time, we would eventually get the first photosynthesizers. Photosynthesizers were very important because, just like current photosynthesizers, they put oxygen into the atmosphere. Now, this time period we're talking about is actually about 3 billion years. So most of the life on Earth was single-celled organisms for most of Earth's history. Once oxygen got into the air, though, things could start to change a little bit. And about 540 million years ago, so much closer to us in time, 540 million years ago, we started to get complex life. So we had talked about, initially it was just the single-celled life, but then, after 3 billion years, life starts to become multicellular. We see much more complex multicellular forms. And we see things like predators start to evolve. In this image here, one of the predators that's famous from this time is called Anomalocaris. And it has these very prominent front, like grasping tentacles. Now, at this point, life is still only in the oceans. It has not colonized land yet. All of this complex life will be found in the oceans. All right, now sticking very close to this time of complex life, so 520 million years ago, we start to see what will be the early fish and early vertebrates. And it's really the vertebrates that are the most important here. Early fish, of course, are important, but the larger group of vertebrates is what we think of as most types of animals today. Mammals, reptiles, amphibians, fish, birds, these are all vertebrates. And they would all develop from these early simplistic fish. Eventually, those fish would develop jaws. And the jaw actually became a really important evolutionary feature. So jaws would develop early on in the history of fish. So next thing. About 480 million years ago, we start to get living things that will colonize the land. So plants start living on the surface, and they can do this because we're starting to develop an ozone layer, a little protection from solar radiation. So we see these very simplistic land plants, not like the plants that we think of today. These are like mosses and liverworts. And then not too much longer afterwards, 430 million years ago, we start to see insects colonize the land. So insects needed plants or some kind of rudimentary plants there first because they would have needed a source of food, a source of protection, source of shelter, right? So it makes sense that the plants would colonize first, not needing much, and then insects could come along later and live in some of the ecosystems created by plants. All right, so picking up from there, about 370 million years ago, we start to see the first amphibians. So it's only plants and insects that had been on the land up until this point. Well, these early amphibians, they did live mainly in the water. They weren't living up on land like some amphibians do now. These were aquatic creatures, but they had developed limbs. So they had developed 4 limbs, and they even have rudimentary fingers. But they're adapted still to living in the water, but being able to breathe air and take short excursions up out of the water. This could be to avoid predators or get food, like insects, resources that are on the land. These amphibians, which developed from the fish that we saw previously, would eventually become reptiles, would eventually become mammals. And 200 million years ago, this is during the time of the dinosaurs, so the dinosaurs are ruling the land at this point. About 200 million years ago, we see our first mammals. And during the time of the dinosaurs, these mammals were very primitive. They mainly looked like rodents, so think shrews or mice, things like that. They were living underground. They were probably insectivores, eating insects in the soil. And they stayed like that for the entire time of the dinosaurs, because the dinosaurs were taking up every other ecological niche. And it wasn't till after the time of the dinosaurs died out, so when asteroid or comet struck the Earth, killing off all the dinosaurs, or almost all the dinosaurs, right? Because birds are descendants of dinosaurs. Once most of the dinosaurs had died off, that's when our mammals started to diversify. And we see the mammals become all the forms that we're used to now. So you can think of bears, wolves, apes, humans, giraffes, hippos. All these different types of mammals came after the dinosaurs. All right, thank you very much.